All right, so as we wrap up chapter 27, we're going to focus today on Japan. And really what we want to focus on more than anything else today is similarities and differences between how Japan responds to the West and how everybody else that we've talked about recently, Russia, the Ottomans, China, how all of them responded to the West. I think what you're going to find is that Japan takes a very unique approach to Western attempts to impact them. So if we jump back for a second, how did the Ottomans respond to the West? All right, they scoffed at it initially, and then
Defeated in several places, realized how behind they were, tried to industrialize, but weren't given technology because Europeans led the monopoly, and then also did social reforms like campaign reform.
Good. So, initial disdain for all things Western, then they get their butts whooped, namely Napoleon's invasion when he defeats the Mamelukes in Egypt. Wake-up call for the entire Muslim heartland of the Middle East and North Africa. And then there are some people that say, all right, maybe we should try some of this. And then there are others that say, no, let's stay traditional. Let's stay true to our past. You have some attempts at reform like the Tanzimat reforms, but ultimately the Middle East is frustrated and never entirely allowed to industrialize. What happens in China? Eileen? Good. So more similar or more different to the Ottomans? More similar. So that same sense of superiority, we're China, we're better, we've always been better. Everybody loves us, everybody wants to be us, everybody is terrified of us. Opium trade, drug trafficking into China. Conflict ensues, opium war, and China gets destroyed. And then China wages an unsuccessful civil war, and then China wages an unsuccessful revolution against the Europeans, and they keep ending up right back in the same spot, which is stuck. Right. And then last class we took a look at Russia. And how does Russia respond to all of this change? Stephen? Good. Good. So they want all the good stuff. They want the wealth. They want the factories. But they don't want to become like the West culturally or politically. And so it's almost like they want the buffet option. I want to be able to go up to the buffet and I want a little bit of that. No, I don't want that. That's gross. I'll take some of that. Heat me up some of this. And now I'm good. I got the stuff I wanted. So, when we look at Japan, we're going to give you a quick rerun of where we last left them, which was a long, long time ago. Anybody remember last time we talked about Japan? 13. Yeah. What's that, Stephen?
Actually, no, we last talked about them 22.
Right. We got a little bit in 22 with kind of our East Asian wrap-up at the end of the early modern era. But the last time we really spent a lot of time on them was in chapter 13. And so we went through the whole chaos of the fighting for power between the emperor and the feudal lords who were called daimyo. Good, you got to shake off all that rust. And then who else was fighting for power in Japan? Buddhists and the samurai were supposed to be obedient to the daimyo, and then they overthrew the emperor, and who got in power then? The shogun, which sounds like shotgun, but don't get confused because it's not. And so when we last saw Japan, Japan was kind of a mess. And so as we come to Japan now in the modern era, these are some of the things that we find. Japan's economy is not running efficiently. They've turned into essentially kind of the second coming of feudal Europe. So you've got all these feudal kingdoms throughout Japan. They're not taxed well by the central government because the central government has very little authority. If the central government's not getting much in the way of tax revenue, what happens to the country? Well, the country as a whole goes broke, but what happens to the people in that country when the central government doesn't really have the funds? All right. Option one is you create your own local governments. Does that guarantee everybody gets treated fairly? Does it guarantee everybody gets treated the same way? Does it guarantee everybody has access to the same resources? No.
You starve and die.
Right. And in some cases, because you don't have anybody looking out for you, you starve and die and dance in your desk. Come on, dude.
Oh, okay.
Now, what we find that's interesting in Japan is Japan is able to start making some changes on its own. So unlike the Ottomans, unlike China, Japan is able to recognize, you know what, we're kind of slacking off. We're not as good as we used to be. It's time for us to improve. And so you see them make some headway in terms of agriculture. You see them start finding more efficient ways of farming. You see them coming up with better tools. You see them being willing to learn from other civilizations. It doesn't change the fact they would still like to keep everybody else out. You remember at the end of chapter 22, we talked about how they kicked out the Europeans. They had that crucifixion on the beach at Nagasaki, where they took the Christian missionaries and they lined them up on crosses and they made a very dramatic statement that said, "We don't want you here anymore, get out." They still want people out. But they're recognizing that it's becoming more and more important to learn from the outside world. That's a tricky balance. We want to learn from the outside world, but we want to keep the outside world outside. I mean, how do you do that without the internet? You guys are like, I don't know. How do you do anything without the internet? I mean, seriously, how do people function? Paul.
You do kind of what Russia did, how they send people to learn and then bring back their knowledge.
Very good. You send people out. What's that? You invent the internet, right. Which clearly they did, which is why in our history books we always talk about how the internet was invented in the 1850s by Japan. I mean, that's the way I heard it. I don't know about you. And now this is going to go out on YouTube, and so many people are going to get so screwed up.
I think the internet was actually invented by Albert.
No.
He actually claimed to invent it.
He might have claimed to coin the phrase, but I should really take this opportunity to start just disseminating wildly inaccurate historical information. Now that we have all these people watching this.
Julius Caesar was an alien.
No?
This painter believes Julius Caesar was an alien.
Do what, Stephen? I'm apparently supposed to say hi to AJ from Stephen. Okay. Okay. It's not weird, trust me. I don't know what's going on, but it's not weird. And like 12 different people want me to say, no, they want to say hi to their moms. Yeah, I'm not saying hi to your moms. That's weird. Oh, I know. One of these days I'm going to get fired. It's fine. Okay, so back to Japan, now that we've said hi to everybody that needs to be said hi to. Because there's like 12 people that watch this, so we've pretty well covered our bases.
Hello, person in Poland who watches us.
One of the things that we see happen in Japan as we're heading into the modern era, Japan weakens its connection with Buddhism, with Christianity, and to a degree even with Shinto, and becomes a far more secular society. Now, where have we seen this same transition play out? Russia, where else? Western Europe. We have seen this same transition precede industrialization. We have seen this same thing happen where societies kind of go through this period of feudal control and intense religious devotion, And then slowly over time, they break with the religion and they break with the feudalism. They become more centralized. Centralization leads to things like what? Industrialization. What else? People move to cities, urbanization. We see a growth in learning. We see a growth in the arts. We see increases in invention. We see this same progression time after time after time. And we're going to see it happen in Japan now. They're going to break with this feudal system. They're going to gradually re-centralize. They're going to become more and more secular. What happens next? Oh, look, increase in literacy, increase in learning, increase in new ideas. We've got the improvements in agriculture and industry taking place. It's that same kind of progression. Now, in Japan, though, we have a dilemma. And you have a question. Yeah, it is kind of like a Japanese Renaissance. Now, the dilemma we have in Japan is, as we're having this Renaissance, and I don't know that they would actually use that term, but we can call it that because it makes life easier. The question becomes, who do we learn from? Who do we want to be like? Now, in centuries gone by, what would Japan's response to that be? China. It's like a no-brainer. But now there are new options. Who are the new options? The West. And so your textbook talks about this bone of contention. There are some young people in Japan, some students, that are very, very pro-Western Europe. And they believe that the educational system should emphasize Western learning. Now, at the same time, what's the other group that you're always going to have no matter what civilization and what time period? The conservatives. And the conservatives want? They want tradition. Tradition. Thanks for being there, Stephen. I appreciate that. All right, and so in Japan, tradition means what? Tradition means what in Japan? Confucianism. Thank you. Shintoism as well, but Shintoism is not necessarily a way to govern and control society. Shintoism is a way for individuals to function spiritually and to maintain a love of their country, but it doesn't organize society as efficiently as Confucianism does. Trina?
Do they have what's called the civil service?
Yep, they do. Now, so Japan is on this slow path to progression. They have actually already surpassed China. So you know China, Opium War, China thinks they're all big and tough and they come in and get smoked, kind of like the opium by the British. Yeah, you see what I did there? Okay. By that point, Japan has already surpassed China. And so as England is coming into China and creating a sphere of influence, and Tarina's texting in her backpack, and France and Germany and Russia are coming in and creating spheres of influence, Japan actually comes down and creates a sphere of influence in China as well. Japan has already surpassed China at this point. But guess who they haven't surpassed? Western Europe. And so what happens to Japan is in the mid-1800s, an American Commodore, Nick is happy, an American Commodore, which is a high rank in the Navy, he rolls into the harbor in Edo, just outside of the imperial capital, with a small fleet of battleships, maybe like 4 or 5. And he brings with him this rosewood box from the president at the time. Can anybody tell me who was president in the U.S. at about that time?
James Buchanan.
No. No. Not George Washington. Yes. No. Which makes it harder. I want to say it's like 1867. No, it's not 1867. I don't even know. No. No, it's a guy you've never heard of. Millard Fillmore.
Oh, Fillmore.
Oh, Fillmore. Yeah, I'll give you 30 seconds to tell me as many things as you know about Millard Fillmore. Go. That doesn't count. We're not counting Succession. What? What? I've never worn it around my ear. It's not comfortable.
Did Millard Fillmore come between Jackson and
Honestly, don't know. I don't know anything about Millard Fillmore. Anyway, coming back to this now. He's a Caucasian male. Nice. Matthew Perry lands in Edo Harbor with this box. And inside this box is a message from President Fillmore of the United States. And the message basically says, in all sorts of diplomatic and polite language, it says, Tarina, stop talking. ... The United States would really like to open up an economic relationship with Japan. Polite enough. And what do you think Japan's response to that request would be? No. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you making the trip all the way over here, but we respectfully decline. However, Matthew Perry inserts his own little note, and Matthew Perry's note says, reading between the lines, I have a bunch of battleships in your harbor, and I'm going down to China for 3 months, and when I come back, I'm going to have more battleships in your harbor. XO, 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 Matthew Perry. And so Matthew Perry conducts something called gunboat diplomacy, which is a phrase we've heard before, using force of arms to get what you want. Gunboat, as in boat with guns, gunboat. Gunboat diplomacy. Now, roughly around this same time, the samurai are finding themselves none too happy with the Japanese government. Now, if I told you that the samurai wanted to keep Japan's culture and social hierarchy and economy and everything else pretty much the way that it was, who would that remind you of? The Janissaries. Very good. So, you should see some connections between the Japanese samurai and the Ottoman Janissaries. That supreme military force that for so long has always been so good and so effective, that's now feeling threatened by outside ideas and doesn't want to change. And so this is where those of you that are Tom Cruise fans may have subjected yourself to The Last Samurai. No, we are not going to watch it, but it does give you a good general idea of this samurai uprising and feeling threatened by the West and things like. It's not the exact same time. I'm just saying general theme of dissatisfaction. Stephen and then Nick.
Are you gonna watch Mulan?
Never. Never will we watch Mulan.
Why not?
But the song? Wait, that's your argument. But the song. Which song? We'll Make a Man Out of You? I feel like there's a longing here that I'm not really in a place to fulfill. Nick?
About the samurai, would I be correct in saying that the samurai were eventually defeated by the Japanese emperor who amassed an army of Western-style and Western-style weapons and organization?
Yeah. That would be accurate. Okay. Moving on. Never fails. Every year somebody brings up Mulan, and next thing you know, it's like a 5-minute epic saga about how great Mulan is and how much we should watch it. And like most of you have seen it. It's like, what's the appeal? I really have no response to that. Other than, no, we're not watching The Little Mermaid. Okay, wait. Here, I know what we can do. For 30 seconds, you can list off as many names as you want, and I'll respond to as many of them as I possibly can with no. Ready, set, go. No, 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 no. No. No, 5 seconds left. No. No, time. Okay, that was fun. I hope you enjoyed that too. For the people that are listening online, I sincerely apologize. Okay, so here's what happens. You know how in China they chose to respond to Western aggression with force? And what was the outcome of that? They lost badly. What happened when the Mamluks in Egypt tried to respond to Western aggression? They got obliterated. What happened when Russia tried to compete with the West in the Crimean War? They got annihilated. We're running out of adjectives, which is good because we're running out of examples too. Japan takes a very different path. Japan concedes defeat when Matthew Perry shows back up with his fleet of 8 ironclad battleships. And rather than fight, knowing they would lose, they give in to the U.S. demands and open their doors to trade. But it's not with a, oh, well, I guess we're going to lose and life's going to suck forever. Instead, it's with a, why don't we see what we can learn from this? Why don't we see if we can improve in the long term, knowing that the short term is going to suck a little bit? Nick?
How were the Japanese able to get industrialization like railroads and other battleships?
It's a very good question, and I don't have enough of the intricate details to probably satisfy the questions that I know that you have about how the Japanese actually get industrial technology when the Europeans didn't want to give it to anybody. I can't give you the specifics. What I can tell you is that the Japanese government goes through a significant period of upheaval. Some of it is on purpose, some of it is by accident. The end result is that a 15-year-old emperor is put in power. So younger than some of you. The shogun relinquishes his hold on the government. The daimyo give virtually all of their authority back to the government. And the Meiji Era, which is a period of reform and change in Japan, begins. Yes, ma'am?
Who are the shoguns?
The shogun was the top military leader in Japan. And he has now been pushed to the side.
The man?
Yes, it's a title.
I thought it was like daimyo, right?
Daimyo is a title too.
Oh.
Right, so the shogun is the top military leader. The daimyo are like the feudal nobles. So this emperor's name is Mutsuhito. Right. And Mutsuhito has a long-term plan. And the long-term plan is, let's go learn as much as we possibly can about European society, government, economy, production, education, blah, blah, blah. Let's send advisors to all of the major Western nations. England, France, Germany, Austria, Prussia, Russia, the United States, all of them. And let's figure out what they do. Let's figure out what they do well. Let's figure out what their weaknesses are. And let's bring all of this back, compile the notes, and let's make a plan for our country that will allow us to improve and get stronger. What we call the self-strengthening movement. Let it strengthen ourselves before we try and fight these people. Because if we fight them too soon, what's going to happen? We're going to lose. Badly. And that will only set us back further. So, they do this. They send scholars. They send diplomats to all of these Western nations. And they learn. They observe. And they come back and they compile their notes. And now they turn it into a European-style buffet of knowledge. And they decide they are going to model their government off of the Germans. So we are going to have a powerful leader, but we are also going to allow an opportunity for representation, much like you see in some of the other Western nations too. And so Japan develops something that they call the Diet. Kind of. And I'm probably horribly pronouncing it. I don't know if it's Diet. I don't know. But it's their representative political body. Stephen? I don't know. Who cares? Nice. That's the approach to learning. If we can't figure it out in 5 seconds, who cares? Nice. Nice. Just warms my heart. All right, we're also going to model our army off of the German model as well, because at the time the Germans had by far the best fighting army in the world. What's that? Yeah, and heading into World War I, far and away, the best military on the planet. Yep.
Didn't, by the time the Japanese were doing this, hadn't the Germans just defeated the French in the Franco-Prussian War?
Could be. Sounds about right. We're going to model our Navy after the British. We're going to adopt the American method of education, which is on its way to being a public system of education.
The British Navy definitely was.
Right.
Germans got better at it.
Yep. And that's why you're going to take the best of both worlds. German Army, British Navy. See if you can do both. Yeah. Treatment of women. Any guesses? Wah, wah. Yeah, stays the same. So again, who does that remind you of? The Ottomans with the Tanzimat reforms. We're going to think about it. We're not going to touch it yet. So what does this do to Japan's cultural identity? I mean, you're able to keep parts of it, but do you have this samurai culture? Do you have this, code of Bushido at the heart of your country? No. Are you able to preserve the emperor in the position that he used to be as this very distant, aloof figure above everybody else? No. It's like what? Yeah, it's kind of like a more liberal Russia in some ways. And so I want you to see the sacrifice that was made here. In order to get themselves to a place where they could compete, they had to abandon some of their tradition. That is not an easy choice. It is not easy to give up some of the things that make you who you are in your attempt to improve. And so it oftentimes becomes a question of, what do you want more? Do you want to improve? And sometimes improve, I don't know, it has different definitions. In this case, it meant be more economically powerful, be more militarily powerful. But to do all that, it meant abandoning some of the things that had always been hallmarks of Japanese culture. Nick, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. As an example of how quickly they're able to embrace this new identity, this Meiji Era starts in 1867. Within 5 years, they've constructed their first railroad. In less than 30, they have 500,000 trained soldiers with Western weapons. And they have a fleet of steam-powered ironclad battleships. Stephen?
All these ships are going to be incredibly costly and costing materials.
Hey, I didn't write the book. Don't blame me.
There have to be some ships. Have to be a lot of ships.
They may not be technically battleships, but they are large-ish ships of war. How about that? Can we go with that? Stephen? 5 seconds. We don't care. Okay. I get it.
Is their whole like basing their weaponization on Germany affect their decisions in the world wars, or is it just like Italy? They're like, oh, it's us winning.
That's a great question. Looking at their relationship with World War II, does their desire to model so many things off of Germany affect their decision to align themselves with Hitler? No. It was more they had a lot in common. They had both felt like they had been wronged by their neighbors. So I mean, Japan's issues with China, to say nothing of Russia, the United States on the other side. Similar desires to construct empires, in the region where they were. Germany trying to carve out a European empire, Japan trying to carve out a Pacific empire. Mutually beneficial desires and plans, and so it kind of made sense for them to be allies at that point. Yes, Nick?
Didn't the Japanese actually, like the Italians, fight on the Allied side during World War I?
Technically, yes, but and again, I could be wrong and overstating, but from what I've learned, it's a relatively minimal involvement, and most of what they're doing is carving out their new empire in the Pacific. So you've got, just before World War I, you've got the Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War. And so then during World War I, they're increasing their holdings in China and the Pacific Rim. It's not like they're taking the trek all the way into Germany. It's going to be more colonial fighting at that point, taking colonial possessions away from European powers. All right, so at this point, now that they are industrialized and powerful, they are able to politely evict all of these Europeans from their country, once again close themselves off from foreign influence, and now begin the task of constructing their own empire. So 1894, they cancel their extraterritorial rights with Europeans. Stephen?
What did the Western Union policy?
It was just one more avenue for trade. It was especially another place that was relatively wealthy that could purchase Western goods if you forced them to trade with you. So it's become less about acquiring Japanese goods as it is opening rich markets for European goods. That's the B-Day bell.
Hey guys, school's out.
Yay! All right, now what's interesting here, and again, it shows you just how different the approach was for the Japanese. Because the Japanese were able to slowly industrialize, they're now able to copy the European model and become an imperial power. So Japan's going to go next door to Korea and begin to exert their influence on Korea. So they're going to go to Korea, knock on the door. Hey, Korea, you're going to start buying our stuff now. What? Yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to start buying our stuff now. If you say no, we're going to shoot you, so don't say no. Just start buying our stuff. Okay. Now, this bothers China because China, who's obviously still in the throes of this whole sphere of influence fiasco with the Europeans, China's trying to recover. China's trying to re-expand and re-engage and take back some of the territory they've lost. One of the places they're hoping to go is Korea. So now, China and Japan are going to get in this little fisticuffs match over Korea. Fisticuffs is just fun to say. It means a fight. Japan decides we don't want to share. And there's some minor scuffle over a border dispute. Next thing you know, China and Japan are at war with each other. And we have what's called the Sino-Japanese War. And what we find is that China's not nearly as big and bad as they thought they were. Still. And that Japan really has surpassed them. And so you get this wonderful political cartoon of this little tiny Japanese samurai standing on top of this Chinese soldier. It's almost a David and Goliath moment, where Japan has finally beaten the giant. And so now, I mean, the doors are open. Who else could possibly be a threat to Japan in that portion of the world? Russia. So, logical thing to do,
The war of Russia.
Russo-Japanese War, and fight over this area that we call Manchuria. And lo and behold, what do we find? The Russians ain't that good either.
Don't
I thought the Russians invested
Well, they did, but remember, what's the Russians' big weak spot?
their military.
Well, not only is their military a step behind the rest of Western Europe, what got them in trouble in the Crimean War?
Europe, Western Europe hates them. Train.
Right. Their problem was UPS. It was logistics. Don't you guys watch TV? Yeah, apparently we fast forward through commercials now. I forget. All right, the problem was logistics. The Russians didn't have a way to get here as quickly as the Japanese did. Yes.
Were there any major important engagements of the Russo-Japanese War other than at Tsushima Strait?
Define important engagements.
As in big battles between the two sides.
Define big battles.
Battles where there were a lot of people, a lot of...
I just being vague.
I mean, are you just looking for high casualties, or?
high casualties, important strategic value, so on and so
I mean, from a military history standpoint, probably. From a AP World History standpoint, we could honestly care less. I mean, that really is kind of the mantra of this class when it comes down to the minute details, is who cares? Which is unfortunate, because there's a whole nother world of history available to you if you want to delve into the minutia. There's actually a publication, I think it's still running, called Military History. And so if that's something that you like hearing about the wars and the battles and the generals and the strategy and whatnot. I mean, once a month they write about 15 different wars throughout history and who fought and how they fought and why they fought. And there's some cool stories of heroism and individual achievement and ingenuity and cowardice and everything else. From the AP perspective, who cares? I know. And it's kind of unfortunate, but again, when you're already covering 10,000 years of history, something's got to give. So, interestingly enough, and it's funny to note the lessons that Japan learns during their time as an imperial colony of the Westerners. In Korea, Japan forces Korean students to learn Japanese instead of their native tongue. What does that do to Korean culture? Well, not destroyed, but weakens it, certainly, with the next generation. They take land from the Koreans and they give it to Japanese officials and have them go live in Korea. Colonization. And they refuse to allow Korea to modernize and industrialize. Where'd they learn that trick? From the West. So it's funny to see the lessons that Japan embraces compared to a lot of the other places that Europeans went to. Right. And not so little, because they create an empire that rivals most any other European nation except for Britain.
How long do they keep it?
Till World War II. So, 40 years. Not a bad run.
What is their empire?
It's a good chunk of the Pacific Rim. So it's Japan, Korea, portions of China depending on the time period, Vietnam, the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, Malaysia, right.
Aren't most of those territories acquired in the initial Russia in 1941-42?
Some are. Some of them have already been taken. Okay. So when we look back at all four of these places that we've covered in the last two chapters, Ottomans, China, Russia, Japan, who seems to come out the furthest ahead? Japan. Who seems to suffer the most? China. And you have the Ottomans and Russia in the middle. Now, of the Ottomans and Russia, who seems to do a better job of industrializing?
Russia's doing better.
Russia, but I mean, it's only because they're able to get more of the industrial technology. Now, speaking of Russia, I said we would go back if we had time, and we have time. Last class we were talking about with Russia the fact that they're having a really hard time hanging on to control. You know, they partially liberated the peasants and then they pulled it right back and they said, well, yeah, here's your land, but you got to pay us for it. And they dangled political representation with the Zemstvas, and then they said, yeah, but we're not really going to listen to you. And then they took, all of these Enlightenment ideas coming out of the West, and they're like, yeah, you don't have a prayer of getting those here, so you might as well forget about it. And then they take things like the secret police and political oppression and censorship, and they use all of that to keep their people in line. The problem with all of those strategies is you can only pull them off for so long before people get so frustrated that they just don't care anymore, and they're willing to fight. They get past the point of just don't care and I might as well put up with it because who can do anything. And they get to the point of, I don't care if I die. I don't care if I get sent to Siberia. This has to stop. And it's made worse by the fact that Russia can't elicit the same sense of national pride that it used to. It's hard to keep your fans when you lose. And as somebody from Chicago who has been a Cubs fan for a long time, when you keep losing, it's hard to keep your fans. You suck. No, I said they lose a lot. I didn't say they sucked. Minor difference. So the issue that Russia's having is that Russia is losing a lot. They lose the Crimean War in their own backyard. We talked about that, fictional water balloon fight. If you get beat up in a water balloon fight, literally in your backyard, and the other kids are coming from 3 blocks away, right, you kind of suck. Either that or it's a problem with your plumbing. I don't know. But either way, you need to fix something. And then there's the issue with the Japanese, the war that we just talked about, the Russo-Japanese War, where the Japanese are able to take away a portion of eastern Russia. And the Russians are powerless to stop them. They can't beat them. Now, if you are the average Russian person, you don't like losing. Let's just acknowledge that. Nobody likes losing. But sometimes it's easier to swallow a loss to a good team than to the really crappy team. Which of these two defeats do you think the Russian people could handle better? Losing to the British and the French or losing to the Japanese? Losing to the British and the French. Why?
Because they understand why they lost.
Right. As ethnocentric as it is, it's because they're European. And Russia has always looked up to the West, even when they didn't want to admit it. And so if you get beat by the champs, no shame in that. But you get beat by the JV team, that's not good. That's not good. Now, is it fair to categorize Japan as the JV team? No, because they got really good. But in the eyes of the Russian people, they're not going to look at Japan like that. Nick?
Didn't the Russian Tsar use the loss of Japanese as an excuse to go prosecute Jews?
Yeah. Because again, you have to turn the people's frustrations to something else. You lose the Crimean War, people are frustrated. People are pointing fingers, they're blaming, they want a change in management, whatever. You lose the Russo-Japanese War, people are ticked, and somebody better be getting fired over this one. So you have to spin it. You have to find a new focus for their frustration. That sort of external conflict leads to internal conflict. The peasants are ticked that their free land wasn't free, that their political representation wasn't representative. They're ticked that their economy doesn't provide them with the kinds of jobs and wages and lifestyle that they want. They're mad. And what is the Russian government's response to angry peasants? Suppression. Keep them quiet. Use the secret police. Use censorship. Keep them quiet. Beat them into submission. Take away the ringleaders. Send them to Siberia. Let the people know that rebellion will not be tolerated. Right. Play up the ethnic divisions, which are part of the problem, incidentally, is that Russia is not one unified mix of people. Unified mix of people? No. Russia is not one single group of people. Russia, ethnically, is about as diverse as anybody. So the Russian people even have issues with each other. So you bring all of this to a head as you get to the end of the 1800s. The secret police can only do so much. You can only arrest and exile and imprison and execute so many ringleaders before there's just too many, before they start hiding too well, before the rest of the population starts helping them instead of helping the government. You can only fake the political representation so long before people just don't believe in it. Eventually the Tsar says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create a national representative body. England has Parliament, the United States has Congress, Japan has the Diet. We're going to have the Duma. We are going to have a representative body for the entire nation, and people will be allowed to vote. Guess what? We're not going to listen to them. Right, it's like the Estates General. We're going to finally cancel all those land payments for the peasants. But do you think that removes their frustration by this point? No. If you'd have done it the smart way, which was free the peasants, give them the land, and not have the land payment, fine, maybe you salvage this. But freeing the peasants, giving them the land, and then be like, yank, no, you have to pay for it. And then wait 30 years. Be like, oh, you really were that upset? Okay, fine, I guess we can cancel them. Like, that's not going to make them all go, oh, thank you, you're so wonderful. And be like, oh, what took you so long? Sorry, dude, that's 30 years of frustration. We hate you now. Done deal. And then the Tsar decides, nah, I'm losing too much power. The people are getting too out of hand. So guess what? Secret police, come on back in. Let's be more oppressive. What this eventually leads to is this fine gentleman here, Tsar Nicholas Romanov. Will end up having the unfortunate designation of being Russia's last Tsar. That's the World War I guy. Right. Right. So they had a good run, but what we will see here by the end of the modern era is Russia in the last days of having this Tsar dynasty in power. And so what we're going to see as we transition into the present era is a very, 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 very different political landscape across the globe. We really have reached the end of monarchies. We've reached the end of empires and dynasties. And in the present era, especially once the world wars are over, we've reached an era of increasingly global democracy. It's not everywhere yet. We also see the rise of dictators to counterbalance that. But it's interesting that we're going to see, this new trend in government around the world. This model of ruling that has served us for the last 5,000 years of history that we've studied is suddenly on the way out. And so all these things that we've talked about, chapter after chapter, monarchies, successions, empires, dynasties, bureaucracies, all of that. No, not the bureaucracies. We're going to keep those. There's going to be so much change heading into this last era. Plus, you guys are almost done. 8 more chapters left. Home stretch. All right. So that's the end of chapter 27.